They said, "She's too wild to wed." Everyone knows it. In Cinder Hollow, that label was a life sentence for any woman too fierce to be tamed. But when a smug coward struck Cassie Marlowe in the crowded market square, it wasn't her hand that flew back. It was Wade Colton's. He didn't draw a gun. He didn't throw a punch. He took her hand, faced the whole town, and dared them to call her unworthy again. He looked at her and promised, "Stand your ground. I stand with you." In a town that lives on whispers and fear, can their love survive the wildfire it sparks? This isn't about breaking her spirit. It's about a man strong enough to stand beside it. Some loves are too wild and too true to cage. The market square of Cinder Hollow was a place here secrets traveled faster than the wind and gossip stuck like burrs in horsehair. That morning the air buzzed with the sound of boots scuffing dry dirt, the clink of coins at the feed stall, the soft mutter of women who pretended to mind their business while their eyes said otherwise. Cassie Marlowe stood right in the middle of it all, boots planted, braid draped over one shoulder, fingers hovering close to the worn handle of the pistol strapped at her hip. Her shirt was dusty from the morning ride out to check the fence line. She hadn't even bothered to brush off the sweat and grit. She liked it that way, a reminder to the town that she'd rather smell of horse than roses. Across from her, Luther Kane leaned back against a hitching post, his fancy black coat too polished for the trail, his silver belt buckle glinting every time he shifted his weight. The smirk on his lips was the same he wore every Saturday, but today he had an audience. A few yards back, a cluster of townsfolk gathered, a rancher's wife in a blue bonnet, arms folded tight, a pair of stable hands elbowing each other, hungry for a show. An old man who had nothing better to do than soak up other people's shame. "Marlowe," Luther drawled, voice oily as lamp grease, "I heard you were looking to sell that old roan you ride. Or are you hoping to trade her for a groom?" His words dripped with mockery. Laughter, thin, nervous, flickered through the circle. Cassie's eyes didn't flicker. She lifted her chin just enough so that the sun caught the stubborn line of her jaw. "Trade her for a groom? Well now, that'd be a step down for the horse," she shot back. A few in the crowd choked on surprise, but the tension only thickened. Luther pushed off the post, taking a slow step closer. His boots left shallow prints in the dirt, deliberate, heavy. He wanted the whole town to see this. The bold Marlowe girl put in her place. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" he said, eyes hard. "Riding around like you own these streets, like you're one of the boys. But you ain't. You're a girl in breeches pretending she's worth something more than a warm bed come winter." Cassie's hand twitched near her gun. She could see her reflection in his belt buckle, a smear of grit, a braid swinging like a rope. But she didn't reach for iron. Not yet. A breeze kicked up the dust, swirling it around her boots. Somewhere a dog barked. The stable boy stopped, grinning. The rancher's wife's mouth pinched tighter. "I reckon," Cassie said, voice calm as creek water, "you'd know a thing or two about warm beds, seeing as you've never kept one warm long enough to matter." A sharp gasp rippled through the onlookers. Luther's nostrils flared. He stepped so close Cassie could smell the cheap whiskey on his breath. "Careful, girl. This town's got no place for a mouthy filly like you. You keep this up, you'll die alone in the dirt." She felt the sting of it, the word alone. Because some nights, that was the truth she wrestled harder than any stallion. But right now, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing it. She leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "Better alone in the dirt than beside a snake who calls himself a man." For a moment, neither moved. The dust danced around them like a warning. The townsfolk held their breath. Some were waiting for the slap, the same one they'd seen given to other women who spoke out of turn. But Cassie wasn't other women. Her fingers brushed her holster, not to draw, just enough to remind them all she could. Luther's sneer faltered, just a crack in that polished mask. He straightened, adjusting his coat like he could brush off the insult with the dust. "Watch yourself, Marlowe," he spat, turning to the crowd for approval that wouldn't come. But the circle had shifted. Heads turned, eyes down, folks pretending to fuss with baskets and boots. Because in Cinder Hollow they'd seen bold men swing fists and spit threats. But it wasn't every day they saw a woman stand tall, unbroken, in the middle of the square, daring them all to call her less. And Cassie? She just stood there, braid trailing over her shoulder, fingers steady near her gun, heart hammering like a war drum no man would ever silence. The sun hangs heavy over Cinder Hollow's dusty square, baking the wooden storefronts and the gossip into something sour and sticky that clings to the air. Boots scuff dry earth, wagon wheels creak, and every whisper feels like a match struck too close to dry brush. Cassie Marlowe stands at the heart of it, alone, but never small. Her braid swings behind her shoulder, a black line of defiance against the haze of golden light. Her boots are planted, her thumb hooked at her belt, close enough to her holstered pistol that the townsfolk keep their distance, but not far enough to stop them staring. Luther Kane stands opposite, his silver belt buckle catching the sun like a dare. He's the kind of man who polishes his boots to shine, but lets his soul rot in the dark. There's a half circle of folks around them, ranch hands, a storekeep, women pretending to mind their baskets but not missing a word. "You think you're better than us, don't you, Marlowe?" Luther's voice carries like a snake's rattle, soft, dangerous, daring someone to move. Cassie lifts her chin, eyes hard as flint. "Better than a man who can't stand the fire in a woman? Every damn day, Kane." The stable boys snort behind their hands. Martha at the dry goods stall sucks her teeth. The breeze dies for a heartbeat, as if the town itself is listening. Luther's grin is all teeth and poison. He steps closer, boots crunching through the dirt until they're close enough Cassie can smell the whiskey on his breath. "You think that mouth makes you strong? You're nothing but a stray mutt barking at folks who pity you." Cassie doesn't back down. She doesn't even blink. Her hand twitches near her gun, but she knows she won't draw. Not yet. Words are her bullets for now. "I'd rather be a stray than chained to a coward's porch," she spits. It's too much for him. Maybe because it's true. Maybe because it comes from a woman who refuses to flinch. Maybe because every eye in that square watches to see if he'll break before she does. His hand flies up so fast the crowd gasps as a dry, collective breath sucked through grit-stained teeth. The slap cracks through the square like a rifle shot. Cassie's head whips sideways, braid flying, the thick strands catching the sun before falling back against her shoulder like a flag that refuses to drop. Her boots shift in the dirt, but she doesn't fall. She tastes blood at the edge of her tongue and feels the sting bloom across her cheek. A hot, raw brand that says she didn't belong here. Not to them, not to him, but she doesn't touch it. She won't cradle a wound that belongs to him, not her. A murmur spreads through the crowd, a ripple of shock and something else, something uncomfortable that tastes like shame. Martha clutches her basket tighter. The stable boys stare at the ground. A ranch wife tugs her daughter behind her skirts. Luther straightens his collar like the slap was nothing, but there's a tremor in his fingers he tries to hide. He scans the faces for approval, for the nods that used to come so easy when a man reminded a woman of her place. But today the square feels different, the silence heavier, the judgment turned back on him. Cassie lifts her eyes. The world tilts for a second, her heartbeat roaring in her ears, but she fixes her gaze on Luther, steady as a stone. There's no quiver in her lips, no tears, only that unbroken line of her chin, the line he meant to crack. And then, over the hush, boots scrape against the dirt. A figure steps through the circle of onlookers, broad shoulders, hat pulled low, coat dusted from the ride in. Wade Colton doesn't shout. He doesn't draw iron. He just walks, slow, deliberate, like a storm rolling across flat land, impossible to outrun. He stops beside Cassie, so close she feels the warmth of him at her side. The sting on her cheek fades beneath the steadiness of his presence. Wade looks at Luther once, just once, and then he shifts his eyes to Cassie. He doesn't ask if she's all right. He doesn't have to. He reaches out instead, takes her hand, rough palm wrapping around her fingers, steady as the ground under her boots. The crowd holds its breath again, because a man just reminded Cinder Hollow that sometimes you don't have to raise a gun to fight for something worth keeping wild. Cassie stands taller. She tastes iron on her tongue, But what she feels in her chest is not shame. It's something like hope, fierce, fragile, and untamed. And in that square, under that cruel sun, a rumor begins. Maybe the woman too wild to wed was never the problem. Maybe it's the cowards who fear the fire they can't control. The slap still lingers in the air, like dust that refuses to settle. Cassie Marlowe stands alone in the middle of Cinder Hollow's market square, cheek stinging red from Luther Kane's open hand. Her braid drapes over her shoulder, ends swinging near the grip of her pistol. Not drawn, not yet, but close enough to remind the world she doesn't stand here unarmed. Luther stands opposite, boots spread wide, silver buckle catching the late afternoon sun. His grin is sharp but shaky, a predator who knows he's gone too far, yet dares the town to say so. Around them, the townsfolk hover in a ring, a circle of judgment, pity, and the same fear that's kept them silent too long. A woman near the feed store clutches her baby closer. The stable boy freezes with a coil of rope half slipped from his hands. A pair of ranch wives exchange a look that says they've seen too many men get away with too much for too long. Cassie lifts her eyes and finds Luther's gaze, all venom and triumph, the kind that tastes like copper when you bite your own tongue to keep from cursing him to hell. But she doesn't touch her cheek. She won't cradle a wound that should brand him, not her. And then, boots scrape dirt. Heavy, steady steps push through the circle. Heads turn. The crowd parts just enough to let Wade Colton through. But they don't dare open the path wide. They want to see this. They need to see this. Wade's hat is pulled low, shadowing eyes that carry every hard mile he's ridden and every truth he's never bothered to say out loud. His coat is worn at the edges, dust from the road clinging to his shoulders like a mantle. In one arm he carries a cloth sack, flour, maybe coffee, the day's errands that once mattered, but now tumble to the dirt without a second glance. He doesn't run. He doesn't shout. He walks, slow and deliberate, like a storm rolling in off the plains. His boots scuff past the shop porch, the water trough, the staring mouths and whispering eyes. He stops when he's close enough that Cassie can feel the heat radiating off him, grounding her when her own fire feels too wild to hold alone. He stands so his shadow cuts between her and Luther, the coward who still thinks the slap gave him some measure of control. Wade doesn't look at Luther first. He looks at Cassie, really looks. His eyes trace the raw red bloom on her cheek, the slight tremble of her braid, the defiance still burning in her spine. Cassie's breath catches. She wants to speak, but the words tangle up. She doesn't want pity. Never that. But she'd forgotten what it feels like to be seen, not as trouble, but as worth standing beside. Wade lifts his hand. It hovers for a heartbeat before he takes hers. A rough palm, a thumb brushing over her knuckles like he's dusting off all the dirt they've tried to throw at her for years. His grip is strong, not to hold her down, but to hold her up. Luther Kane shifts his boots, clearing his throat like a man who suddenly realizes the crowd isn't laughing with him anymore. He tries to catch Wade's eye, to drag him into some spit-slinging contest of words that will end in fists or bullets. But Wade doesn't flinch. Instead, his gaze slices through Luther like a brand. His voice, when it comes, is low and steady. "You done?" he says. Not a question, more a fact that hangs in the air like a threat. "You had your say, your swing. You feel bigger now? Or just smaller where it counts?" A murmur ripples through the ring of onlookers. The ranch wives stand a little taller. The stable boy lifts his head. Someone spits in the dirt behind the blacksmith's post, a sound sharper than any word. Cassie squeezes Wade's hand back, the promise of his touch settling the storm in her ribs. She doesn't need him to speak for her, but God help her. It feels good to know he'll stand beside her when she does. Luther's grin curls, half snarl, half threat, but his feet betray him. Inching back, digging ruts in the dirt he used to think he owned. Because in this square, under this sun, everyone can see it now. Cassie Marlowe doesn't stand alone. And the wildfire they always whispered about? Turns out it burns brighter when someone dares to hold it. Not cage it, not quench it, but stand close enough to share the heat. The square of Cinder Hollow feels smaller than ever. like the dust and gossip pressing in from every crooked porch and wooden beam could choke the breath out of anyone standing in its middle. But today, in the center of that dry, whisper-hungry circle, Cassie Marlowe stands taller than she's ever stood. And Wade Colton stands beside her, not as a shield to block the stones they'd throw, but as the proof that she's never going to stand alone again. Cassie's cheek still burns red from Luther Kane's slap, a mark as raw as the spit pooling in every wagging tongue around them. Her braid falls over her shoulder like a flag that refused to hit the dirt. But the real thing that keeps her steady is Wade's hand wrapped around hers, rough from fence posts, warm from something deeper than rage. Luther hovers near the edge of the circle, boots shifting, eyes darting, like he's looking for an escape hatch in the crowd he once called his pack. But those same neighbors, once so quick to nod at his smirk and shrink from his shadow, stand frozen now, caught between shame and something they don't dare name: respect. Wade lifts his eyes, scanning the faces. The old man with the drooping hat who once told Cassie to mind her tongue. The ranch wife who clutches her child, like the truth might stain her apron. The stable boys wide-eyed near the trough. They all wait, hoping someone will lie for them, make this mess disappear behind closed doors. But Wade Colton's voice is the sound of dry thunder rolling in, a storm that promises no one's secrets stay buried forever. "You all saw it," Wade begins, voice steady as the sun sinking behind the saloon roof. "You watched him strike her, a woman who's done nothing but stand her own ground, work her own land, and speak her own truth." He squeezes Cassie's hand, not like he owns it, but like he's lending her his spine for the moments she might doubt her own. His eyes sweep the circle again, pinning every coward, every whisperer, in the glare of a truth too big to outrun. She didn't raise a hand first. She didn't swing on him, though she's got every right and twice the backbone. Wade's jaw flexes, voice low but sharp. "And some of you, you'd clap him on the back for it, wouldn't you? Call it keeping a woman in her place?" Someone flinches near the feed stall. A dry cough breaks the hush. Luther shifts his boots, searching for a single soul still willing to nod his way. But every pair of eyes slides past him like he's a stain on the porch they'd rather scrub away. "You call her wild," Wade says, the word dripping off his tongue like poison turned cure. "You call her too fierce, too proud, too much. But that's not what scares you, is it? What scares you is she doesn't beg you to like her. She doesn't bend when you lie, and when you try to break her, she stands here anyway." Cassie's breath hitches. She looks at him, at the way the dust settles on his hat brim, the sun warming the sweat at his collar, the way his thumb brushes her knuckles like an anchor against the howl in her ribs. "You want to know what a man is?" Wade's eyes flick to Luther, who can't hold his stare. "A man doesn't raise a hand to a woman to feel bigger. A man doesn't spread poison and call it truth. A man stands right here, beside the fire, even if it burns him." The hush deepens. The wind kicks up a swirl of grit that settles around their boots like a boundary no one dares cross. And then, a sound. Small, soft, dry palms clapping together, one slow beat after another. Old Martha Carter, bonnet askew, eyes shining like she's remembering the girl she once was, before fear taught her to be quiet. Another clap joins. The stable boy, knuckles raw from work, but grin wide as the prairie. A ranch wife next, cheeks pink, fingers tapping together like the first drops of rain after a long drought. Wade doesn't flinch at the applause. He just tightens his grip on Cassie's hand, eyes sweeping the square one last time. His voice drops low, enough for her and the dust in the town that can't pretend it didn't hear. "They'll talk," he says, "but let them. They'll whisper until they choke on the dust you leave behind." Cassie lifts her chin, the sting on her cheek a crown instead of a brand. She knows the wind will carry this moment to every porch and pew, and she knows she'll walk through it, hand in hand with a man too strong to break, too honest to lie, too wild to ever try to cage her fire. In Cinder Hollow that day, silence did what fists never could. It set her free. The hush that falls over Cinder Hollow Square is heavier than any gunshot, deeper than any gossip that's ever slipped through its creaking porches and cracked saloon doors. It's the kind of silence that comes when people see something they can't spin into a lie fast enough. When the truth stands taller than rumor and refuses to bow. Cassie Marlowe feels the eyes on her. She feels the sting on her cheek where Luther Kane's slap blooms red like a warning. But it's Wade's hand wrapped around hers that keeps her chin high, her step steady. He doesn't hold her like a prize. He holds her like a promise that no man's venom, no town's whisper, no coward's slap can turn her fire to ash. They stand in the center of the market square, boots planted side by side in the dirt, dust swirling around their feet like the ghost of every insult ever spit her way. Wade's eyes flick once to the people watching, the ranch wives clutching their baskets, the stable boys frozen mid-step, old Martha Carter's bonnet tilting in the breeze as she dares to watch a woman stand unbroken. No one says a word. Not Luther, shrinking behind the trough, his smirk long gone. Not the sheriff leaning against the jailhouse rail, hat pulled low to hide the shame that he never stepped in. Not the shopkeepers who'd once crossed the street when Cassie rode through town on her Mustang with her braid flying like a battle flag. They stand there just long enough for everyone to see, really see what it looks like when a woman refuses to bow and a man refuses to let her stand alone. Then Wade shifts, gives Cassie's hand a gentle squeeze. No words needed. She knows. They turn together, boots stirring up small clouds of gold dust that catch the sunset light. The sky behind the old clapboard rooftops burns orange and pink, like the world itself is tipping its hat to the wildfire, walking away hand in hand. Each step feels like a nail ripped free from the coffin they once built for her spirit. Each step says, let them whisper, let them choke on it. The dust clings to her hem, to the cuffs of Wade's coat, but they wear it like a badge. Proof they have stood in the middle of every storm and didn't flinch. A child breaks from her mother's skirts and watches them go, eyes wide, a question hanging in the air that only Cassie and Wade know the answer to. How do you stay that fierce? How do you walk away unbowed when the world wants you on your knees? They don't turn back, not once. Not to the square that once called her too wild to wed. Not to the faces that fed on every rumor about her pride. They walk forward, boots side by side, shadows stretching long across the dirt road that winds out of Cinder Hollow and into the open country where gossip dies on the wind. And if you look close, real close, you'd see the tiniest curve at the corner of Cassie's mouth, the quietest smile that says she's not tamed, not conquered, not small. And Wade, glancing at her from beneath the brim of his trail-worn hat, knows that's exactly the woman he chose, wildfire and all. By the time the last of the dust settles, they're gone from the square. But the hush stays behind, heavy as truth, light as freedom. Cinder Hollow will talk, as it always does. But this time, it won't be the kind of talk that cages a woman's spirit. It'll be the kind that reminds every watching girl, every tired ranch wife, every half-broken drifter, and that some fires can't be stomped out. Some loves don't bow, they burn. Maybe we don't all live in dusty frontier towns like Cinder Hollow anymore, but maybe we still know what it feels like to stand alone when the world wants you quiet. Maybe we still know what it means to hold your ground when gossip and fear would rather break you than see you free. Cassie's story is about more than a slap or a rumor. It's about what happens when we choose to stand beside each other instead of turning away. It's about the strength it takes to hold someone's hand, not to tame them, but to say, I see you, wild spirit and all, and I'm not going anywhere. In today's world, we see folks judged for being too loud, too proud, too different. The neighbor with the wrong past, the single mother, the old rancher who won't sell out. Maybe we can learn from Wade Colton. Sometimes courage isn't drawing your gun, but standing steady when the easy thing is to stay silent. So I'd love to hear from you. Do you think a love like Cassie and Wade's could survive today? Have you ever had to stand beside someone when everyone else stepped back? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Your stories might remind someone they're not alone either. Thank you for riding with us through this tale. If this story sparked something in you, please like this video, subscribe for more Wild West tales that touch the heart, and share it with someone who still believes some fires aren't meant to be caged. Until next time, stay wild, stay kind, and keep standing your ground.